Um, yeah, great. So we've got a good program for you today. We're going to focus on a specific type of challenge that ActivityInfo can address, namely partner reporting. We'll look at the advantages of centralized data collection and management, and access permissions to support the data collection phase, and then look at how ActivityInfo supports the analysis and sharing of reports to put that data to practice. And then finally, we'll look at two real-world examples where ActivityInfo has made a difference. All right, next slide. Okay, so but by way of introduction, we should clarify to start with what we mean by partner reporting. So this describes a case where you have a donor, or it could be an implementing program, or a consortium collecting secondary data from many different implementing partners. So secondary data is going to be generally aggregate data, such as the number of people reached or the number of kits distributed, as opposed to primary data, which would include the actual list of participant names, the survey results, or other raw data at the individual level. Now, managing that primary data in the field is, of course, its own challenge, and we've done other demos about how ActivityInfo can help with that. But once you even have a few partners, collecting and organizing all of that secondary data, all of those numbers or qualitative data about results of the individual partners, it can be just as important and just as challenging. And this is actually what prompted ActivityInfo's first version way back in 2008. At the time, I was an information management officer for UNICEF in the DR Congo, and I was tasked myself with collecting and analyzing data from UNICEF's implementing partners for a returnee integration program. And I spent so much time shifting through Excel sheets, or if I was really unlucky, it would be like a Word document with like key figures buried in it. And then you'd never have the right information, so you still had to call somebody in the field, and they were on vacation and or on leave, and so it was just so time consuming to get even the most basic information together that it left very little time over to actually use the data. It was difficult to answer basic questions. Like, my boss comes to me and says, how many schools did we rebuild last quarter? I mean, that's kind of basic information that we should be able to answer. But there's also more like, you know, substantive impact driven things like, if we look across all of our geographic areas where we're working, where our partners are working, what do nutrition assessments show are the biggest needs, and where should we prioritize funding? All of those kinds of program level questions require good data from your partners. And so it's these challenges that drove the design of Activity Info and some of its key features that Brendan is going to talk to you about next. So yeah, maybe Brendan, you can start us off.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for setting the scene for kind of partner reporting more broadly, and the origins of activity info, and kind of meeting those needs. I have a lot of interactions with people who are looking for solutions to do partner reporting. A lot of them are in a system where they might be collecting just Word documents or PDFs from partners, and having to parse through that, extract the information that they need to get into the reporting framework. Others are using Excel, hopefully with some sort of standardization on the schema, on the columns there, and the spreadsheets that are being submitted. And then they're having to harmonize that data, clean it, before they can do their analysis. And I hear time and time again how challenging this is. There's a lot of errors in the spreadsheets. At a certain point, just the number of records is too cumbersome for the type of office tools like Google Sheets, for example. And also, I think the big one is around getting that data in one place and cleaning it so that you can actually start to answer questions about the data, or from the data. And commonly people are saying, it just takes too long to provide information, like Alex was pointing out, how many schools did we rebuild? So there's a lot of challenges there that Activity Info it's a nice solution to address many of them. And fundamentally, from a kind of feature perspective, what we're really supporting is data collection, data management, and analysis for reporting purposes. And when we're engineering activity info, our goal is to support the entire data lifecycle from the point of collection, in this case, coming in from the partners themselves, processing it, storing it, we maintain that back end infrastructure, that database tier and the hardware as well. Management tools. We're going to talk a lot today about role-based access control. But then, Alex later we'll talk a little bit more about analysis and visualization. We're really trying to provide a single integrated system, digital system to support that whole life cycle. And then specifically when we get to partner reporting as a use case, we're really supporting these fundamental categories in our view. That's that idea of data collection and entry, doing that through mostly web applications. I think here are a browser-based application. You could also do it through mobile application. Then that process of validation. So once it's come in, is it in the correct format? Is it of sufficient quality? If not, facilitating that dialogue back with your partners so that they can correct those errors and resolve any issues that are there. We've got tools to support that. And then, once we have data of good quality that's coming in a timely manner, how do we make sense of it? How do we aggregate it up to those KPIs that you might be reporting on or might be monitoring for operational purposes? And then importantly, dissemination. Once we've done that analysis, how do we share it? How do we get it into the hands of people who need it? Whether it's for operational purposes or just to let them understand, where we are with our programs. So we kind of support these main workflow areas, and we can do that with a number of different types of data, whether it's project activity reports coming in on some sort of cadence. We're not really focusing on primary data here, but that's also something, if we're looking at beneficiary registration services, financial data, et cetera. And I think one of the real value propositions for activity info is how easy it is to deploy and manage it. A lot of those things you could do in a database system, but activity info makes it really easy for people who aren't necessarily coders or developers. We have a no-code form designer that helps you implement your data model from your logical framework, your reporting framework, either from scratch, or if you have it already in a system like Excel or another system, you can bring that in and even import the legacy data there. It's super flexible. It's built in a relational data model. Pretty much any data structure that you have, you'll be able to implement in activity info. And I think importantly, it allows you to kind of thread this balance between standardization and flexibility. So you might have some core indicators that all of your programs need to report on, core to your organization. But then there might be some needs at the local level to collect other types of information, to expand on those standard indicators for maybe more operational or regional specific needs. You can do that in activity info pretty easily. And if things change, if a donor wants you to start tracking new information, it's very easy to update. So as you're evolving, the system is evolving too. Another thing that I think is often overlooked is activity info is software as a service. You don't need to procure hardware, computers, or cloud space, cloud infrastructure, and Azure, AWS, or Google. We're taking care of all of that, all the security, everything. All you do is log into the browser, log into your mobile app, and you're getting to work. So that's kind of more on the setup side, on the administration side, but it's also super easy to use for your partners. It's very easy get people into the system. You invite them through email. When you're inviting them, you can determine what permissions, what access they have, so that when they open that email address and the invitation link, they're automatically entered into the system. They've got all the permissions they need to do their work, and then they can just get to it. They can do that in the browser or on mobile applications, online or offline. There's two-way synchronization. This is really helpful when you're working in like intermittent bandwidth environments where the internet might be good one minute, it's not so good the next. You're not really going to know the difference if you're working with ActivityInfo offline. When there's a connection, it's live. When there's not, you just keep working. It'll sync when you get back online. And I think the other big benefit um, is is the data that's in the system is being entered and viewed in real time. So information managers, program managers, as the data is coming in, you have a live view of it. There's no intermediary step where you need to harmonize the data. You can set up your reports and just view that live. A few kind of more IT considerations that I think are really important with ActivityInfo is that it's secure. You know, we understand the organizations that we work with exclusively for social impact organizations, they're using or they're storing sensitive information. So we take that very seriously. We're ISO 2001 certified. Um, it's an information management security certification. We're GDPR compliant. You can implement single sign-on. We have the identity-based access control that we're going to be talking about in more detail later. And if you have really strict security requirements where your IT team wants to manage the whole application on your infrastructure, you can do that. You can deploy ActivityInfo on your servers in your cloud. It's a pretty easy process. Um, the other thing is that ActivityInfo can scale with your organization. There's no storage costs for the data that's coming into the system. It handles very large data sets and high volume of users. The program is, or the application, the platform is fully supported, meaning we have really robust documentation. We've got training. So that's a big plus when you're thinking about bringing new people online into your system to help manage your data. They're well supported by the resources that we're developing. Lastly, there's integration capabilities. I think Alex will touch on that a little bit later. Um, so before we jump into centralized data collection and management, I was thinking that we could do a little poll. Let's see. I'm having a hard time finding the poll.
I got it, Brendan.
You got
Let's,
it? There it is.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to launch.
Okay, cool. So if you could help us out, answer these questions, just select there. We'll give you a minute or two, and then we can give you an update as to how people are answering. You know, what we're really trying to get at with these questions is a sense of, you know, how are you doing your partner reporting? And you know, are you satisfied with that? Are there challenges there? Um, I think also, you know, one of the things that keeps coming up in my conversations is this idea of information being discoverable, being accessible. Is it easy for you to answer the questions that you want to answer of your data? Um,
Yeah, I think that's so important, Brendan. I mean, it requires time and headspace to formulate those questions and iterate, on what questions are important, what questions are going to help you, you know, improve your impact, improve your reach. And if you're spending 90% of your time cleaning Excel spreadsheets, then you don't get to that point. And that's really a
exactly,
shame, because that's the point of the whole process.
exactly.
Okay, we got some responses coming in. We've got about 23 of the 92 people online voting. I can see that probably about half a dozen of that 92 are Otter AI agents. So I don't know if they'll vote, if they're sentient yet. But got some good responses. Maybe we'll give people another minute. I'll keep an eye on when it ticks over to 19. We'll stop. So get your votes in. Last chance.
All right, should we start reading some of these results? What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, so in response to how you're currently doing partner reporting, it doesn't really surprise me here that most people are using Excel-based systems. It's over half, a good majority, and actually second up is text-based documents. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's painful. Okay.
Then yeah, we've got partner reporting, Excel-based systems, Excel, some GIS, Word documents, etc. Um, some trust issues with data there. Some people have good systems, reliable systems. Um, yeah, then accessibility challenge for most people, at least somewhat. And then we've got a bit of a variety there for people interested in the webinar. All right, that's great. We can share the results of the poll, I think, after in the follow-up.
Okay.
So let's dig into decentralized data collection and management. I think this is really one of the key elements to kind of to help you with this whole partner reporting process. You know, fundamentally, with activity info, it really streamlines your data entry. Um, the reason why is because your partners can enter data directly into the system. So there's no harmonization step. It's just there. This really helps any of your information managers, program managers, leadership. They've got real-time program-wide visibility of everything coming in. So if you've configured your analyses and reports, as that information's coming in, they're getting a live look at it. And it creates the single source of truth for everyone in the organization. You don't have files or shared folder structures in the different platforms where you're constantly hunting for data. You know that the data that's in activity info is the one that is reliable. But it's not just a mechanism for collection and entry. Through the roles and the access and permissions that you give your partners, you can actually give information back to them. So you can configure reports that are specific for those partners, so they're able to view the data that they're contributing for their programs in a more consolidated or analyzed way. And importantly, they're also able to create their own analyses and reports by accessing activity info. So that could help them with their own goals, targets, operational needs. And when you're managing with activity info in that centralized way, you're able to improve the integrity of the data that's coming into the system at the point of entry. So when you design your forms, you're implementing a structure with specific field types that's already kind of a form of validation of the type of information that's coming into the system. So you're not getting the errors, people misspelling things, etc. But then there's also really powerful validation logic that you can implement through expression languages or some of the drag and drop tools as well. So that is another kind of filter to keep out messy or dirty data. So you know that when the data is in, it's in good shape. You don't need to clean it, or you need to clean it very little. And ultimately, what that leads to is less time and less effort to do your analysis, and the quality of your analysis is much improved. So rather than kind of show you a bunch of slides on it, I figured that I could jump into a demo to show you a little bit about this and let me, so are you still seeing my screen?
Yeah, no, it's great. And you're in, we can see ActivityInfo now.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right, so this is ActivityInfo for those of you who have not seen the application before or are new to the webinars or to our tool. I'm logged in with my work email address, and I'm the owner of this database. This is just a sample database that's built from our 3W template. For those of you who aren't aware of our templates, they're essentially these pre-configured databases aligned to specific use cases that oftentimes have some sample data to show you a little bit of what's possible, and maybe get you started in configuring your own database. I encourage you to check those out. Um, Mentioned that ActivityInfo is built on the relational data model. So what we've done is set up some reference data sets here, some reference forms. These are capturing things like our geographies. They've got the UNHCR codes, I think. Also our list of partners. That's an important form or data set for partner reporting database. This is where we basically register all the list of partners that we're working with, and then when they're reporting, this will power lookups. It'll also allow us to do analysis later on if we're looking at the partner dimension to summarize information, that type of thing. And there's also sectors here as well, a list of sectors. So these reference data sets, we're able to create connections to our reporting forms or our project reporting forms, and it kind of facilitates those lookups for data entry, as well as giving us dimensions that we can use in our analysis further down the line. So this is our sample data set, just to kind of give you an orientation. We have our organizations, we have our geographies, and then a number of different fields that we're collecting. Importantly, we have the project start dates, title, as well as monthly reports here that are collecting as subforms. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I did want to show you some of the feature functions that are in this form view. First, we're able to create views of our data based on filtered selections of the data table. I've got one set up for care. For example, I go back to my default. If I wanted to set up a new one, I could maybe do one on the sector name, where I want to set up one for maybe agriculture, if I could spell it right. That'll do. I could set up that view of the data. It's specifically on agricultural projects, save it, and then I can even share that across the organization. So if I'm working with program managers or leadership and they just want to get a specific view of the data focused on agricultural projects, they're able to do that. This will show up in their view area. I also wanted to show you a little bit about the form designer. We mentioned how easy it is to use. In this case, it's very easy. We've already built the form out, the sample. But I wanted to highlight some of the validation logic that you can put in there. For example, for funding received, we've set this to be valid if it's, I'm not going to open up the formula, but if it's related to a health project in the health sector, and it's between some value. There's also relevance rules that we could set up. So it'll basically, only show this question if the project status is set to suspended. And lastly, I wanted to highlight this field for reviewer only fields. This is a role-based permission. We'll talk about it later, but this is useful for kind of more administration or approvals. You can set fields to reviewer only, and that'll provide access to individuals who have that permission. Um, if you have, the donors say they want to track funding received, but at a later date they say, we'd also like to see what the current spend is. You can implement that. You can add a new field and say, current funds spent, for example. Then you've added that to the form. When they go in, they can add a record and update that information. I also wanted to highlight a couple other features. One is the importer. So I see that a lot of you are working with Excel-based systems. It might be that it will be a bit of a transition away from Excel into ActivityInfo, but there is an intermediary step where you can use ActivityInfo as that harmonization tool to kind of bring the data in from the different Excel spreadsheets and use our validation logic there to help you with that data cleaning. Or sorry, our validation tools to help you with the data cleaning and get the data into the system. So if I wanted to, I could paste in data from any spreadsheet, and then I get this nice conflict resolution dialog screen where I can match. Here I have a field for my organization name, but it's just named. I can match that to organization name. I can see the locations are subforms. They're highlighted in yellow. I can just ignore these. And then I can see that actually there's some issues with these records. That it's basically saying that these records are invalid. I think probably there's some misspellings of the admin names that are not aligned with that reference field that I've set up. I can go here, continue. I can download the invalid records, send those to my partner, have them update them, and then we can upload them again, and they should be added. If I go through to the screen, I can see that two records match existing records, so they're just going to be updated. And there's actually one new record in my data set, so it's going to add that there. Once I've imported it, I could also use the deduplication tool to scan for duplicates. I can look at the organization maybe, and let's say the project start month, match my sensitivity to high, start the duplicate scan. That's going to use machine learning to look at our data table and come up with potential groups that might be duplicates. Here, they've got the same organization name, but they're all different project start months. I think that looks good. I can skip to the next group. Whereas this one, same organization name, pretty much all the same data. The start months are the same. Remarks are a bit different. I might actually go in here and delete some of these if they're incorrect. So that's the deduplication tool. All right, with that, I'm going to jump back into my slides and talk a little bit about access and permissions. So just to recap, that was kind of an overview of the form view, and showing you some of the tools around centralized data collection and management. Now we're going to transition over into access and permissions. This is a really important feature. I think that is a big differentiator between Excel-based systems or document-based systems and ActivityInfo. It's really our whole role and access and permission system is built around this idea of role-based access control, and at its basic part, or most basic form, it's really the idea that you can configure access and permissions that mirror your organizational structure based on these roles. So you can create a role, give it permissions and access to resources, and then assign that to an individual in your organization. And ideally, the access and permissions gives them the access to the database that's needed to do their job and nothing more, as opposed to taking a spreadsheet, sharing it with someone via email and asking them to fill it out. That's not a very safe way to do data collection or data management. We have a number of different permissions that you can assign to ActivityInfo user roles. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think it is useful to think about it in the context of maybe some notional roles. So, for example, an information manager, we're not going to give them all the permissions and access to all the resources in the database, but it's going to be pretty broad. We're going to want them to be able to design databases, manage data, manage users, share reports, but we're going to hold back some of the permissions to say bulk record delete data. We don't want them going in and blasting a bunch of data. We actually want to keep all the information in the system. We don't want them to be able to export it. That's going to be reserved for administrators or other senior leadership. So broad permissions, but not everything. Whereas your partners, they're going to have a much scaled back version of these permissions. They're really going to be focused on data management, right? Entering information in the system, updating it, and they're not going to be able to have access to all the resources, all the forms, all the databases in the system. They're actually going to only be able to add and update records that are related to their program or to their geography. So you can really get fine-grained granular. You can assign granular permissions to users down to the record level. It's really powerful stuff. And again, rather than talk about it, why don't I show you? Let's go back into ActivityInfo. And rather than look at the database itself, the resources there, I'm going to dive into the database settings. So these are going to be reserved for administrators or those who have administrative privileges. And we're going to focus just on the roles here. I've set up a demo role already, this reporting partner demo role. Excuse me. And I've assigned some resources to them, but if I wanted to add new ones, I could do that here. For example, I could assign this project form. It's already been assigned. But when I've assigned that resource, then I get the permissions view, where this determines not what they can access, but what they can do with the resources that they've accessed. And here we've actually set up conditions for their access that are related to parameters. So I'm not going to get into the details, but basically the parameters are referencing those reference tables that we saw earlier, the partners and the sector. So I've set a condition that the permissions on that form are related to the parameter that I set for them, mainly their partner and the sector. So what that looks like when I add a user is, I can add, I'll just use my personal email address. If I give myself a partner reporting role, I need to select which partner they're associated with and also which sector. So I'll select Care International Protection. If I send the invite there, and let me jump over to, so I got the invitation to join the database, and I can see I don't have any of those permissions that were visible in the administrator role. I only have access to projects, and specifically, I only have access to records related to Care International and the protection sector. When I go to add records, I can only add records related to my organization and to my sector. I do have the option to select the subsector and so on and so forth. But you get the idea there. All right, so I'm going to jump back over to my slides. Actually, I'm not going to go. I'm going to turn it over to Alex, and he's going to talk to us about reports and analysis. But just to recap, it was kind of a light touch for the role-based access control. But I hope you saw that we're able to provide access to resources at a very granular level. You don't have to create a bunch of separate forms for your different projects. You can set up one form and then use parameters and conditions to assign access related to the specific organization or sector in this case, and it really helps with um, with ensuring your partners have a very simple view and are able to do the job that they need to do. All right, over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Brendan. Right. Now let's look at the last piece of the puzzle, which is once you've got all of that data, how can you put this data to use to actually drive impact for our beneficiaries or for accountability? I mean, I think those are the two key things there. Let me start with just our philosophy when it comes to analysis is that, we believe that simple things should be simple, so easy to do, and that more complex things should always be possible. So, we make it really easy to just drag and drop if you need simple sums, counts, and percentages. We'll look at that in a second. But ActivityInfo also has a super powerful query language for complex indicators because we know that sometimes it just really is complex, especially if you're trying to avoid double counting from secondary data. Some of the rules might be quite challenging, but with ActivityInfo, it's all possible. Um, we also offer built into the application tools for visualization. And again, these are really designed with usability and accessibility in mind. The idea is that we don't want there just to be one person on the team that knows how to use Power BI or a sophisticated piece of software. Everybody should be able to drag and drop and get the information that they need so that they can use that to inform their work, whether they're a manager, a grants officer, or a domain specialist looking at nutrition. And once you've been able to create your report, visualize your data, you can either share those reports, those results of the report, using the same role-based access that Brendan highlighted or went into detail about, or you can use the publish reports function to it just produces a link that you can share with anybody by email. That could be a donor, stakeholder, manager. They don't even have to log into ActivityInfo. They can get quickly the key numbers that they need. Um, Lastly, I want to mention that while we're committed to building out ActivityInfo's internal tools for analysis, we support really good integration with a bunch of external tools. So if you prefer to use Power BI, Tableau, or R, for example, we've got you covered. We have a great API integration, which makes it easy to create that live connection between the software. So as soon as the partner reports come in, you can just refresh your Power BI dashboard and get the latest results. All of this is possible because of our really well documented RESTful API. So even if you're working with another piece of software or building your own tools, anything that you can do through the user interface, you can do through the API. Okay. I'm just going to go through a quick demo now. Just I want to make sure that we leave time for questions and for our success stories. But I'll switch back to the same database that Brendan was using. I've got my list of projects here, and the first thing to highlight is here in export. You can grab this JSON endpoint here. It's just a URL that you can copy and paste into Power BI, um, ArcGIS, or another tool that gives you a live connection with the data. Or you can use our R package to query the data. Just you can copy and paste this snippet into our studio and use all of the advanced statistical analysis there. But I'm going to be focusing on the tools that we've built into ActivityInfo. So you can use this analyze menu here to get a quick start. And this isn't just for administrators. Even if you're a reporting partner, everybody has access to this so that you can do your own analysis. Some of your options to share or publish might be limited by your administrator, but you always have the ability in ActivityInfo to do that analysis. So we can start out with something really simple. If I just want to know how many projects we have, you can just drag and drop. Let me drop the count of all projects here. I've got 135 projects. And you can see you can just drag and drop from any of the related tables. So if I want to see that by partner, I'll just drag and drop to my rows. And I can see the number of projects by partner. Or I can look at sector, drag those to my rows. I can turn that into a bar chart, into a pie chart, God forbid. Let's put that here in series. Um, or if I want to analyze based on time, I can drag things like the project start date, start month to my. Well, I don't want to do a pie chart. Let's do a line chart for time. You can see this is by month. That might be too granular for us, so I can always roll that up to quarter or year to get an overview of the trend. So again, simple things, really simple. Um, we also make it easy to design and share these dashboards. Um, so this allows you to combine multiple analysis into a multi-page dashboard. I can easily go in here and edit, just drag and drop if I want to move things around, resize. You have a lot of control over the layout. You can add an icon or a logo if you've got one for your organization. And you can always make changes to these charts. If I wanted to break maybe this down by series or by sector, for example, let me just drag and drop this into the series. And then you can see the trend by sector over time. Just save that and then save report. As I mentioned, you can also publish this. So if I want to publish this, I just click on the publish button, and that gives you a URL. I'll drop this URL in the chat for you. Anybody can um, open that and look at the results. It doesn't give them access to the underlying data. That's important, but it does allow you uh, to see the results that the report designer has chosen. We also have the notebook layout, which gives you a little bit more space for analysis. So here I can add the same types of visualizations, but maybe with some headings. This is maybe my annual report, and maybe add another chart that shows me the projects by sector. So or the partners. We can do also, for example, the distinct count. So if I want to know how many unique partners are working in each, these aren't related. I need, yeah, and all of that can be done through the interface. Great. Okay, let me switch back to my slides, and we'll come to the last section, which is just to cover two kind of real world examples of where this has been applied and some of the advantages that this brought with it. So the first one is UNICEF in the Syrian Arab Republic. My friend Mohammed Talib was kind enough to present with us last year a webinar on how they applied ActivityInfo to their challenge. UNICEF is funding a massive response in Syria, has been for a number of years. Over 100 partners implementing these programs in 269 sub-districts, hundreds and thousands of communities. And they're looking to produce high frequency output and outcome indicators for their HPM, for their humanitarian performance management program. So it's a large volume of data. I mean, this is, I think for 2024, it was maybe 500,000 data points when you break it down by population type, sub-district, actors, etc. The last thing that made this case quite challenging for them was the complex indicator calculations. They were doing so many different activities, but they didn't want to report double counting. So, if you have two partners both doing education activities in the same district, there's going to be some overlap, and you don't want to just add those reports together. So we'll look at that, how they manage that. So these are some screenshots from the webinar we did last year. That's a data entry form that allows partners to report on their individual work, and that it could be as detailed or as simple as you want. So track modality, is this cross-border, an airdrop, whatever, as well as the where the location is, and the activity that they've categorized. Because of the volume of activities, they also use the importer quite a bit, so that partners would send Excel sheets, or partners would upload Excel sheets into ActivityInfo, for all of their sites all at once. This produces a long list of partner reports, of indicator reports, and that's when they used ActivityInfo to turn all of those data points into reach and outcome indicators. So you can see all of the different types of reports that they had created for reach, output indicators, and sector-specific reports. Each unit can um, create their own reports for what they need. And so then you have breakdowns like of health indicators, for example. That might be as simple as the number of children under 5 who have been reached with measles vaccinations. Um, but it can also be an aggregate indicator like the number of people reached, across all of UNICEF-funded programs. Um, and that requires looking at many different, aggregating into to many different across many different partners and activities. So and this is a good case to kind of highlight how ActivityInfo's calculated measures and tables really help here for something complex. So I'll take a minute just to kind of walk through this formula that you see here. The idea is that uh, on one hand, UNICEF is doing door-to-door activities, the D2D. So people are going door-to-door to promote back to school, for example. But at the same time, they're doing radio commercials also to promote back to school. And in this case, both of these activities might be taking place in the same locations, and you don't necessarily want to double count. Just add up these two numbers, because then somebody who's received a door-to-door visit and heard, like, included in the estimate for the radio coverage, they'd be counted twice. On the other hand, you don't want to minimize your coverage, because if you in one governorate you're doing radio commercials and the other you're doing door-to-door, you would want to count those as two separate groups of people. So what this formula does is that first they summarize these activities up to the district level. So we're getting a count, the children, the C who have been reached by door to door, the P that have been reached by parents, and the R that have been reached by radio. And then once we've got those totals by district, then you can sum the maximum of either the door to door or radio. So you look at each district and see, which is greater. Is it the door to door or is it the radio? And then you take the largest of those two numbers, and then you can add up to the province, to the governorate, or to the national level. Um, so this is a bit of a complicated formula. It's a bit of a complex approach to think through all of the logic to avoid double counting. But once you've got that formula, then everybody else can just kind of drag and drop that measure and create the graphs or tables that they need. So it's a little bit of an upfront investment, but it really pays off. Okay. So UNICEF also uses Power BI a lot. So they did the calculation in ActivityInfo, but then pulled out the results of those calculations into Power BI to create these dashboards that everybody loves, where you can drill down by governorate, track goals, progress achieved, and get an overview for all stakeholders. Great. Okay, so the second case that I wanted to highlight is a little bit different. So with Syria, that's one country program. But we've also had a chance to support the Spotlight Initiative, which is an EU funded program jointly with the UN to eliminate violence against women and girls. And this program is a global program, or at least one with a wide reach, that works in 30 different countries, um, working to promote the safety of women and girls, and to supporting civil society and working to promote laws and legislation that protect women and girls in high risk areas. So here the challenge was really to aggregate these informations from the individual country programs up to the global level to get an overview of the program. Um, so Michelle Unda was gracious enough to share their journey with us in a webinar last year, and she told us about how in 2017, when the program started, they had created just kind of internally a big system that combined Google Sheets, a third-party forms service, and many formulas. So this required a workbook for each of the 30 country programs, plus a workbook for the global aggregation. So while this worked initially, it unfortunately it proved not to be scalable. Repeating this process for each country year over year meant replicating the same work over and over. The process was also very error prone for all the reasons that Brendan covered in the first half of the presentation. If somebody was a little bit unfamiliar with Google Sheets, they could accidentally overwrite a cell, break a link, and then Michelle and the team would have to go constantly back and make corrections. Um, and finally, the visualization options were a bit limited with all of this with all of these formulas. Um, so they switched a couple of years ago to ActivityInfo, using one database. So rather than having to have 30 different Excel quote databases or Google Worksheet databases, they had a central database, but each country were given access to parts of that database using the tools that Brendan covered. And that meant that you didn't have to apply the same formulas, the same updates across 30 different databases or workbooks. You can have one central data model where everybody's collaborating and can get feedback and monitor their own programs. So this has allowed the Secretariat of the Spotlight Initiative to move much more quickly during their annual reporting, but also do a lot more monitoring and evaluation on a more continuous basis rather than just waiting until the end of the year. So yeah, super excited to support that important initiative um, over this time period. So I'm going to wrap up. That went on a little bit too long. I'll hand it back over to Brendan, and then we can go a little bit over for questions, um, if there's depending on availability. But back to you, Brendan.
Yeah, we're definitely available to stay a bit longer if you want. I think yeah, I think just to wrap up, um, just a few simple points. Essentially with activity info, doing your partner reporting, you're really able to consolidate on a single system that supports that whole data lifecycle. We've designed it to be easy to set up, as well as manage through time as your program evolves, and to use. It's kind of a non-starter if your partners are not going to be able to use the system that you implement. Um, I think an important component, something that I always hear with the people that I'm speaking to, exploring new systems, is this need for data security. Activity info does that. It improves your data security, and then with the system managing it centralized, collecting it centralized, then you're getting better quality data and more analysis and better information ultimately to improve your programming. If you want to To get started with ActivityInfo, you can sign up for a free trial. We've mentioned a couple times the templates. They're great resources. We have a whole series of webinars that we hold with our customer success team. They're experts in various topics where we go very deep into the technology. So I encourage you to take a look there. And if you have any questions, you're exploring tools for partner reporting, questions specifically about ActivityInfo, you can use the QR code. I think Faye will drop the link in the chat as well. We'd love to hear from you. All right. So with that, maybe we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So I've got one specific one here from Awab. Awab asks, does ActivityInfo support DAX, or is it a new language for calculation? So good question, Awab. We were indeed very much inspired by DAX. I think it's a great tool. So we've incorporated a lot of the functions from DAX. It's not exactly DAX for sure, but we do support a lot of the approach. Let me just drop a link in the chat to the formula reference, ActivityInfo formulas, and you can read more on calculated measures and what we've done there. Okay. 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 So I also see from Adriel. Adriel, maybe I'll let you ask your question live. Let me see if I can find my way to participants. Adriel, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
All right, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So my question is, what are the limitations that most users have faced over the years in accessing and using ActivityInfo? And how have the app developers gradually amended or intends to amend those limitations? Maybe when you guys started with the app, probably people couldn't use the interface because it was only available in English. I'm just guessing. So
Yeah.
what are some of the limitations that you guys have gradually solved over the years, and what are still some of the limitations of the app?
Thanks for that, Adriel. That's our heart. Yeah. So we've been at it for 15 years, and actually, the first version of ActivityInfo that we built in DR Congo was only available in French. So English was the second language that we added. But you're right. We have there's been a progression, whether it's language. So we started out with French and then English, and now I think it's maybe 15, 20 languages that we support, including Arabic, right to left languages to make it more accessible. We've added translation, so it makes it easy to translate your database automatically or through manual translation, so that that partners can report in a language of that they're comfortable in, that they understand. The first version of ActivityInfo didn't have um, the formula language that we have today. So that was a big thing that we added. Um, because initially it was just back in 2009, 2010, it was just sums and counts, and obviously that doesn't meet all of the needs out there. So we've been listening very carefully over the last 15 years. I think user interface, formulas, power. We did a big user interface redesign in 2018 based on user feedback. So, yeah, I could go on for a long time, but I think those are some of the key points. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
All right, that's answered. Okay, so Mohammed Kanona has a question. Mohammed, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you for the great presentation. My question is, in terms of relational database, for example, first of all, I work for UNICEF Sudan office.
Hmm.
and we had a different work to do. I'm information management officer. So our cluster colleagues, they usually use activity info, while other sections, they use different platforms for data collection. So
Hmm.
my question is, can I use the relation database to connect all of these together instead of doing it one by one, for example?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you should be able to add your own forms for your cluster or for UNICEF, and then you can still reference the kind of key indicators from the cluster. You can create survey forms on your own, and build everything into one system. At least that's the idea, because that makes, I think, sharing information and harmonizing information much easier. Does that make sense, Mohammed?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Um, okay. So let me Timerson from Ethiopia. Tim, you had a couple of questions. Let me give you the mic. Do you want to ask your question? Still with us, Temesgen? Temesgen Wario? May have had to drop off. Okay. Um, Oh, I see he's typed his question here. How can we ensure that data collected through ActivityInfo is regularly analyzed and cleaned to maintain accuracy and reliability, especially in rapidly changing contexts? So, um, yeah, how can you ensure that the data is actually analyzed or rigorously analyzed? Well, I don't think that's a technology problem. I think it's something that technology can help with, and I think definitely ActivityInfo can can make sure that the people who are equipped to ask the right questions to can do the analysis, that you have the data. um, but I think that's something that is a process question. I mean, what do you think, Brendan?
Well, I think that in terms of kind of clean data, I think the validation, the structure of the database at the design phase really supports that, right? It's going to help your data be more accurate, more reliable, um, and it's basically going to enforce that and make sure that the data is clean at the point of entry. But then, in terms of analyzing, yeah, I think that's more up uh, to your interpretation of analysis. Are you analyzing the information or the data to extract information, or are you analyzing it to kind of make sure that it's clean and accurate and reliable? If the latter, we offer other tools, the deduplication tool, for example, scanning for duplicates, that can help. And then, if you are bringing in data from other systems, the importer has the ability to enforce the logic, the validation that you put into your data structure when you're bringing that in. So yeah, I think that would be my answer. But then in terms of insights, then that's really when you're getting into those advanced analytics, and some of the reporting that Alex has kind of shared at the end of his presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the at the heart of analysis is about um, asking the right questions. So is it
Yeah.
like you said, is it for accountability, or are you just trying to show your output to the donors to be accountable for the funds that you spent? Are you looking to do gap analysis to understand how do the needs align with the response? You can that definitely something that ActivityInfo can help with. You can do your needs assessment in ActivityInfo and then overlay it with the response, either geographically or thematically, and help make that gap analysis. Are you looking to understand impact? Are you looking to understand those are I think those are the questions that ActivityInfo gives you the space to ask and to explore. At least that's our hope. All right. I still see we've got quite a few people in the audience, so um, we'll take a few more questions here. I see that Awab. Let's see if Awab is still with us. Awab, do you want to ask your question about backup? Hello, Awab.
Yes,
Hi, would you like to ask your question?
yes. I have asked about full backup. If I have my system in info with all data forms, user rules, and I want to make like a backup, like one file at the time, so that I can upload this data if any issue happen to my system. Is Active support this?
Yeah, for sure. With one click, you can do a full export of the whole database, all of the data, the metadata, um, into one giant Excel sheet. You can also pull out the metadata separately, but yeah, for sure, you can always export the full data in a couple of different formats. All right.
Should we also add, Alex, a little bit about the infrastructure and the the way that we're kind of duplicating data on the back end, that type of thing? Did you want to get into that? I don't know, because I think some people might have kind of a sense of the need for backup, because of maybe their machine is compromised. They're kind of bringing it over to an external data set. But when we're dealing with cloud-based platforms or SaaS, it's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we want to support you if you want to make your own backups. That's
Right.
never a bad idea. But I mean, that is also our job and we take that responsibility very seriously. To ensure that we protect your data. So people say the cloud, but really, the cloud means somebody else's computers, and in those cases, those are computers that we rent. We replicate data that you store in ActivityInfo across two different data centers, one in the Netherlands and one in Belgium, which means that there's always at least two copies of the data, actually more, because even within those data centers, there's data centers that are split into different zones that each have their own power source, their own fire systems, fire extinguishing systems, and so um, there's always several copies of your data in real time. In addition to that, we have a point in time backup, so that if there was anything ever happened on our side, we can always retrieve a previous version of that data, and you yourself have access to an audit log and ActivityInfo with a full track changes of all of your data, to mitigate the risk of user error. So if somebody accidentally deletes a form or a bunch of records, happens, and it's no problem, you can always go into the user interface, look at the audit log, and reverse that deletion. So that's a big part of the role that we play, is to make sure that your data is always backed up, accessible, and safe.
Great.
Right. Um, okay. So another question here from John Njabo, about. Let me see if you're still. You may have had to leave, but it's a good question. So the question is about, how can I use ActivityInfo to manage and report qualitative data? And that's a good question, because not all partner reporting is going to be just quantitative numbers. You might be collecting stories, most significant story of change, um, stories of change, other information, and ActivityInfo does allow you to collect that information. We just added a reader view that makes it quite easy to read and consume that information once it's been submitted by partners, and that information is centralized, and then can be coded using those reviewer-only fields. So um, it's not quite a full-blown qualitative analysis tool yet, like NVIDIA or Deducer, but we do have a lot of tools to support that collection of qualitative data from partners. Um, we've got a great case study that we did with UNHCR in Ecuador, uh, that we could pop into the chat here. That um, Ecuador
Oh,
activity info. Yeah,
Alex, can I add something there too?
yeah,
I think there's a real power in capturing that qualitative data in your database that Alex was mentioning, but when it's combined with other types of structured data, um, then it becomes more discoverable and accessible.
yeah,
So the idea of being able to filter on categories or dates, or even individuals, and then being able to easily access that qualitative information that's related to those specific. So it kind of facilitates querying and discovery of that qualitative information that you can then analyze yourself. So yeah, I think that's a really powerful combination, the structured and qualitative information in a database.
okay, great. So the last question, I think it's there's no name attached, but I believe it's from somebody who's maybe um, one of a partner who's reporting into an activity info database for partner reporter somewhere, and they ask, can we create an account to contextualize this organizational? So to paraphrase the question, I think they're asking, how can I use this data that I've reported to different sectors or different organizations through activity info? Like, where's the value for me as a reporting partner? And if I can answer that, it's something I feel really strongly about, is that one of the things that we've tried to do with activity info is to make sure that it's not just a one-way street, that it's not just, you know, organizations in the global north demanding data from organizations in the global south, but that it's more of a collaboration, and that anybody who has access to activity info, you have access to these analysis tools, so you can combine um, the data that you've reported from different sectors into a single report for your organization, so that you can use that data. You can use the maps, the tables, the charts, and the information that you've contributed for your own work, whether that's for advocacy, for fundraising, for raising your profile. Um, whatever, or for doing gap analysis in your own programming. So that's something that we try to promote. Something that maybe we should maybe do another session on, just activity info for reporting partners, of how can you get the most out of the data that you put into the system. But yeah, so I the, um, the answer to your question is yes. Okay. All right. Okay, I think we've gotten through all of the questions, and we're 15 minutes over. So I think with that, we'll bring the session to a close. Maybe Brendan, if you can just go back to that slide with the links. Um,
Yeah.
I would
So this
encourage
one,
you all to, try out the system, especially using one of our templates. I think that's the best way to explore. You get some dummy data. It's not just a blank slate. And the other thing is to, I don't know if we have a contact link, but if you're interested in using Activity Info for tracking your programs, please do contact us, get in touch, and we can look to see if Activity Info is a good fit for your program, and for your organization.